Dear friends, now take this. Women should be silent in the churches. They are not permitted to speak. They should be subjugated just as the law says. And if they have any questions, they should ask their husbands at home, because it is shameful for a woman to speak in a church. This is the holy mantra of all Christian misogynists. The Roman Catholics, all the Orthodox churches, and all the Protestant fundamentalists use and abuse this one biblical verse or two verses from the 1 Corinthians 14. Supposedly, it is from Apostle Paul to justify rejection of ordination of women, keeping them from being pastors or priests. But with many theologians of 19th and 20th century, I'm certain that this verse was not written by Paul. Firstly, it simply does not make sense in the historical context of Paul's churches. Because we know that Paul worked closely with women. Some women were leaders in his mission churches. In the letter to Philippians, for instance, he mentions two women as church leaders, Euodia and Syntyche. In the letter to Romans, he mentions several women as important members and leaders of that church. A number of them he named as co-workers. And there is also Junia, who is being called a fellow apostle, the highest rank among the ministers in the early church. Now, secondly, it does not make sense theologically, because in Paul's theology, in his eschatology, his expectation of new divine order coming any moment now, Paul rejected all cultural and superficial human distinctions. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male or female. Indeed, all are one in Christ Jesus. To quote a well-known passage from the letter to Galatians. Also, the argument from the law does not fit at all with Paul's theology of the law. Since for the genuine Paul, the law was the theological force of the past. It was superseded by Christ. To quote Paul, Christ is the end of the law. That's from Romans. Or from Galatians again, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law. There is simply no other place in the genuine Pauline letters with a similar argument from the law. And thirdly, the apostle did not write it because there are also good textual reasons for it. These two verses are simply an interpolation. Some early scribe who was copying the letter inserted this misogynistic instruction, likely in the late 2nd century. If you leave this passage out, the text actually reads better. It flows more smoothly. And furthermore, some early manuscripts, predominantly from the Western tradition, actually attach this instruction at the end of this chapter, not within. So there are historical, theological, and textual reasons to deny apostolic authority to these two verses. And that is something worthy of repeating and repeating and repeating to all the misogynists. And that is because women played an important role in early church. Unlike in Hellenistic Judaism or Orthodox Judaism until today, unlike Roman Church and Eastern Orthodox churches, or unlike among Christians, fundamentalists and traditionalists also until today. In fact, inclusion of women in the ministry was something which went back all the way to Jesus and his ministry. Join us this Sunday as we continue reading biblical passages unique to Luke. And it was especially Luke who, among evangelists, highlighted and defended the role of women in the early church. This Sunday, we will celebrate and rejoice in women's ministry.